The National Laugh Track Album Review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning. Here tonight to chat about this second album of the year from Ohio-based indie rock darlings, The National. They've been at it since the early 2000s, and for quite some time they were both fan and critical darlings, and you know what? I love them as well. Alligator's a great album. Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers. Always going to be my favorite National record, and Boxer is everything hypes it up to be. For me, though, ever since, it's been a little bit of a rough go. I've never been a High Violet guy. I've never been a Trouble Will Find Me guy. So much so that I almost just stopped listening to The National completely. However, I did think they took a massive step back in the right direction with Sleep Well Beast, the sort of political lyrics on this album, the more electronic leaning instrumentals. I thought this was sort of a fresh rebirth for the band. So much so, I got excited for their next album. Yeah, the I Am Easy to Find album. I don't know. I was not into the album. I thought that a lot of the guests, the women at the National brought to the table, 9 times out of 10 gave it their all and really did make the album something to behold, something that was actually pretty cool, but the National themselves brought this thing down. And earlier this year, they gave us first 2 pages of Frankenstein, which I genuinely think it's their worst album. I mean, I gave it a light 5 at the time, but re-listening to it a few days ago, I think I was actually too generous on that. This thing is so sleepy and annoying and just, God, it's just it's the National really putting in zero effort. And I know I've gotten negative remarks from that review that I was trying to be hip and that I'm just trying to hate the National for a reason to hate the National. Trust me, I wish it was that. The album's boring. So, hearing this album come out last week completely unannounced, I think they announced it the day before, this laugh track album, my hopes were not exactly high, so to speak. But I will say this, though, we are far from out of the woods, but this is certainly better than the first 2 pages of Frankenstein. Alphabet City, you know what? I actually really enjoy this as an intro. It's the same sort of modern day, very mellow, very somber, very drab National tune, but this instrumental is at least a little busier. Lyrically and instrumentally, there's actually a lot going on this track. It also has this sense of drama that I wish has shown up in some of the other recent National records that we've got. Also, Deep End, Paws in Pieces. I think this track is awesome. I wish it was a single. This track has a little bit of a bite to it. It's got the post-punk edge of some of their early stuff. What's going on here? It's still much more on the more subdued side of the National's modern sound, but like I've been saying, even with their last few records, there is some merit to it if they do it the right way. And this is done right. Lyrically, it's compelling, and Matt Berninger actually sounds at his coolest. Turn Off the House is an upbeat, surprisingly wintry track. It's very warm and cozy. And I mean, it's not that upbeat, but there's at least a little oomph to it. There's a lot of tracks like this on the album, and at least wakes me up. But here, the more upbeat instrumental makes the lyrics pop harder. It makes Matt Berninger's vocals sound even cooler than they already are. It's a good track, and once again, it has a surprising amount of drama. Then we also have Dreaming. This is absolutely one of the more apt titles here. This is easily the dreamiest and haziest track on the album. I love the icy synths floating through the background, and just how cold this track comes off. There's a quiet intensity to the instrumental, but there's a hopefulness in the lyrics. Yeah, this track actually has a lot going for it. It's just enough to keep my interest. I think this track is really solid. And once again, the legitimate drama behind this track throw me off. Did not expect it. So easily, clearly, at least for me, there are much better highlights on this album compared to the first 2 pages of Frankenstein that we got earlier this year. But very clearly also, we are not out of the woods just yet. Weird Goodbyes featuring Bon Iver. Holy hell, this is so boring. I will give credit where it's due. There's a lot of great tracks on this album, but this here is putting me to sleep. The slow pace, the half-assed vocals, Justin Vernon's very phoned-in feature. This is not good. This 5-minute track takes a damn eternity. This is one of the worst tracks here. Laugh track featuring Phoebe Bridgers, this album's title track. This is a toughie for me because there are some actually great elements to this tune. I mean, on one hand, instrumentally, this is such a bore. Matt Berninger sounds like he's gonna fall asleep, and I'm right there with him. But what I hate about this track is just how gorgeous it is lyrically, especially when you rolls around to the chorus. This is one of the most memorable choruses on this album. Lyrically, this is deep and personal. But everything else about this track puts me to sleep. Phoebe Bridgers, I mean, much like her features on the first 2 pages of Frankenstein, she's better than this. This track is just not up to snuff. And in cases like this, these 4-minute tracks feel like 12-minute bland odysseys. Hornets, my god, this is so boring. God, vocal-wise, these sleepy vocals are absolutely killing me. Lyrically, they're not even trying anymore. Who ordered all these cliches? And the rest of this ho-hum, boring-ass 4.5-minute track just makes me want to bash my damn brains in. Code on a Hook, I mean, now we're just getting into we've been here territory. This is the equivalent of some of the worst coffee shop indie that I've ever heard. Ever. And the cliches, they are back, and in great numbers. Lyrically, I think we're actually getting worse, and this 5-minute track, once again, feels like it's twice as long. No. And did I mention, it does not progress at all, and Tour Manager's not much better. This is another very starry-eyed Twilight indie tune, and you know, I actually like the ticking clock in the background and the very dark atmosphere of this track. That's pretty cool. It's everything else that's just falling apart. This sounds like 8 other tracks on this album, and most of them are better than this. I've got nothing. So very clearly, we are not out of the woods just yet, but I mean, I think this is a big improvement. Like Space Invader, for example. I saw a 7-minute track, almost cried into my hat, but you know what? You know freaking what? It is very, very good. There is so much drama on this track between the vocal performance and the pounding drums. I'm impressed and emotionally invested with each crashing instrumental. I'm just waiting at the edge of my seat. 4 minutes in, this track hasn't actually stopped progressing yet. It even gets bigger and more climactic towards the end of this track, and by the end of it, it's just euphoric. It's really impressive. And Crumble, featuring Roseanne Cash, might be the best track here. For a few short minutes, this is absolutely magic. This brings me back to the earlier, more dramatic tracks on this album. I love the alternative country vibes as well. And Roseanne Cash's feature, I mean, best feature on any national project this year. It may be the most straightforward track here, but everything comes together really, really well. And Smoke Detector, an 8-minute finale. I once again had the urge to cry into my hat, but they nail it. It's quiet, but really intense at the same time, as is Matt Berninger's performance all around, lyrically and vocally. And unlike a lot of the other tracks here, this track progresses quite a bit. It builds, it shifts, there's that post-punk edge to it that I love. I mean, it's an 8-minute track, but it's justified. If I heard as much passion in this one track alone on some of the worst tracks here, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Overall, I still have a lot of reservations. The bad moments here are absolutely awful and remind me of just everything that I've hated about modern music from the National. I'm sorry, but it's the way that it is, especially for me. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a major step up from where they were a couple of months ago. Yes, is this reinventing anything? No, but the drama on a lot of these tracks, the lyrics on a lot of these tracks, and the way that things come together makes for some really interesting tracks at the end of the day. Much more than I thought going into this thing, because I saw it was an hour-long album and I was scared. But you know what? The National put their heads together and actually come together with a slew of really great tracks. I just wish it was a little more consistent. But step up. I'm feeling a decent 6 on this album. Let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.